Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined by CJ Vogel. We're here to talk a little recruiting for the Longhorns right now on Tuesday. CJ, interestingly, the portal is in and out right now. We're trying to figure out exactly what's going to go on at the University of Michigan. At first, Michigan, it looked like, wasn't going to have anybody in the portal. Then their defensive coordinator left. Then their linebackers coach gone. Then their strength and conditioning coordinator on Monday leaves. That stirs the pot a little bit. And now here we are on Tuesday waiting to see if any of these guys actually go in the portal from the University of Michigan. If they do, Texas would clearly have some interest on those guys. But barring that, barring what could be a massive upheaval at a program like Michigan, no different than what it was at Alabama and Washington, et cetera, it could be a big one for the University of Texas because they actually are long in the tooth on defensive linemen, which is a position Texas needs desperately. So barring that, though, it looks like the portal for right now is over, both going and coming. We'll have to wait and see, though, what happens with Michigan. So for the most of today, what we want to talk about for the recruiting breakdown, we want to talk about some of the elite prospects Texas has right now. Its eyes on in the state of Texas and some of those five-star out-of-state guys, right, CJ? So let's get started and go into this. This is the recruiting breakdown brought to you by our friend Mark Saunders. Mark is the only insurance agent you need to help keep tabs on protection for all of your stuff, everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Call Texas All-State Agent Mark Saunders' office today at 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Give him a call, 512-218-8571. All right, let's start with quarterback, CJ. Longhorns already have their guy, and that is KJ Lacey. Steve Sarkisian out to see him today, in fact, in Saraland, Mobile, Alabama. Sark will be there. Lacey is the quintessential five-star out-of-state guy. I know he's not – I think he's like ranked fifth or sixth in the country right now at quarterback. But Sark picked him out early and really likes him. You don't see Texas going after any other quarterback in this cycle right now, right?
No, just KJ Lacey. I look at it. Texas went after him very early, and the comments that were made right after he committed is Sarkisian wrote down on a piece of paper after one clip of his film saying Bryce Young 2.0. Kind of goes to show you how highly he thinks of him. Obviously, Bryce Young, number 1 overall pick, Heisman winner as well. That's how highly he views KJ Lacey. I think he'll be the only guy in the class.
All right, let's move on to running back. We're going to go through these relatively quickly just to give you guys a sense. At running back in state, there's Tiger Ryden and Ricky Stewart. Ryden out of DeSoto, Stewart out of Tyler Chapel. Out of state, there's 2 guys to really keep an eye on at this point. Jordan Davis, and a lot of people know he's already made an unofficial visit to Texas. The young man is out of Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana, California, recruited nationwide. The other one, Tashard Choice, visited this morning in Mississippi, and that's Keelan Deere. Tell us a little bit about Deere, CJ, if you don't mind. Give people a sense that Choice not just looking only at Davison, even though Davison a clear priority.
Yeah, we just watched the film together about Keelan Deere. I mean, it took almost 3 minutes before he was brought down to the ground from a tackle. So, and tremendous burst and acceleration right there from Keelan Deere. He has plus size, I would say, at the running back position as well. It looks like he can add to his frame too. So adding to the fact that he can run very quick is something that I think Texas is prioritizing. We talked about the importance of Jaden Blue on this Texas roster, kind of giving a 1-2 punch with what Texas has going right there. He certainly fits the mold there. And of this bunch, I see a little bit more explosion from him than I have from the rest of the bunch that Texas is recruiting. And I think that might be something that they try to hone in on and prioritize moving forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, long story short, he's from Quitman, Mississippi. Keelan Deere is 6'1", 200, has offers from around the country. He is going to be a tough pull. That Quitman's right on the Alabama line, too, with Mississippi. So be aware of him, though, is a new name, relatively speaking, but it looks like Tashard Choice, very interested there, again, in that SEC footprint as well. All right, wide receiver. This is interesting because DeCorey Moore is the in-state guy that we know Texas wants. We know they want Kelshawn Johnson out of Hitchcock, another in-state guy. Then Ja'Cory Watson out of Shadow Creek. Then there's a number of guys, Emmanuel Choice out of Lancaster, that Texas could be interested in at receiver. Out of state, it looks like there's 3 right now that they're kind of honing in on. Perhaps there's a 4th. Jamie French is the most recent. He's an offer out of Jacksonville, Florida, Mandarin High School, who's one of the top players in the country.
Yeah, he told me this morning that the number one thing about Sarkisian and his offense that got him excited is how well they use his wide receivers and put them in positions to make big plays down the field. That's something that has caught his attention, having watched A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy this past year. Texas offered just this week, and now it already looks like he's excited to get down to Austin for a visit this spring. But I look at these out-of-state guys, and Texas isn't going after, the nobodies out there. These are all some very talented guys that you'll see up in that top 15, top 75 ratings on a national scale. Marcus Harris out of Mater Dei. Obviously, Texas offered Caleb Cunningham as well last week. Cunningham released a top 8, top 10 that did not include the Longhorns. However, Texas was a little late to this party. Let's see if Chris Jackson and Sarkisian can chip away and start fighting their way towards a potential official visit this summer.
Yep. And the interesting thing about all of these guys, French goes 6'1", 180. Cunningham is 6'3", 180. So big guys that play, and these are all nationally ranked guys, I think, for the Longhorns. And I think that's interesting because you look at it and they want guys that can play if they're going to go out of state, they want to go after the top tier guys. And that's one of the reasons why we're kind of talking about these guys in this way. Harris, about 6 foot 180 himself out of Mater Dei. So also a top 200 player in the country. So these out-of-state guys that we're kind of focusing on right now are very interesting to me. All right, at tight end, the commitment already is from out-of-state. Amari Winston out of Calhoun County, a tight end. But the Longhorns are looking for more than just one. And as of right now, it looks like they're going to be looking in-state for that one. There's a couple of them. One that we need to talk about is Keody Armstrong out of Jasper. He's a guy for him. Nick Townsend out of Spring Decaney. Keandre Johnson out of Terrell. There are a number of different guys in a number of different ways Texas could go here. Winston's more of that pass-catching tight end. Do you think they're going to go another pass catcher, or do you think they'll go perhaps more of that big, bulky tight end that can play in line?
It's a good question because that's exactly where Winston, projects to be. A little bit more of a guy that you can see down the field. I know with these guys right now, they obviously have that ability to stretch the field vertically. That's kind of what put them on the map. But when you look at Keody Armstrong and Nick Townsend specifically, there's a little nastiness in what you see in the trenches there. I know Keandre Johnson, from Terrell is in that same mold. I do think there is a little bit more of a projectability in what they can become over Johnson at the moment. So I'm looking at Keody Armstrong, who was on campus often last year for the fall, made a visit during the summer as well. He was back on campus last week for the junior day. So Texas is familiar with him. Ty Anthony Smith is obviously a guy that he played with at Jasper, and there's familiarity there. Smith was actually one that was recruiting him very heavily on the visit. So interesting to see. I like Nick Townsend a lot. I think you're looking at what could be a Jatavion Sanders 2.0 kind of mold right there if you're able to get his body right. But the two of them are very talented, and if you can pair them up with Emory Winston, you're looking at a very strong tight end haul for 25.
All right, let's move on to offensive line. And offensive line is a little bit different. There is a strong in-state group this year for the Longhorns. Michael Fasusi out of Louisville, Ty Haywood out of Denton Ryan, Laurent Rogers out of Mesquite Horn. Then you had Jonte Newman as well as Ryan Foji out of Bridgeland down in the Houston area. Out of state, Texas, really, it looks like there's maybe one guy they're pushing hard on right now, and that's a young man out of San Francisco, John Mills out of St. Ignatius in San Francisco, 6'5", 290. He's a guy that visited for the junior day last 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, he was on campus. He made the flight in, came in Friday, stayed all the way through Saturday's festivities on campus. I actually look at this in-state class, Bobby, as a something that I think Texas would prefer. You have these guys in your backyard. You don't have to go too far to get them. Obviously, you have the ability now of winning football games on the field and showing development on the field as well. Say, hey, we can go recruit nationally, but it's much nicer when these big-time stars are right in your backyard, and that's exactly what this in-state crop possesses. When you talk about Michael Fasusi, Lamont Rogers, the Bridgeland offensive tackles, there's a lot of talent here, and I think Texas can be a little bit picky now that they have depth on campus to go out and say, we know exactly where we want to prioritize these guys and exactly, not having to go too far. I think that's a strength for them in this cycle.
I didn't even mention Jackson Christian out of Port Neches Groves, who Texas went to see, Byron Washington, the big human out of DeSoto, and then Connor Carty out of Prosper, another guy as well. So big wave of in-state offensive linemen. They're not doing much, and Kyle Flood is not immune to going across the country looking for offensive linemen. But really, the in-state offensive linemen, it just looks like such a good crop. They're not going to have to push too much in that regard this year. All right, let's move on to defense. But before we do, I want to say thank you one last time to our sponsor. That's Mark Saunders. Call his office today at 512-218-8571. With more than 35 years of experience, you will be in good hands with Texas alum Mark Saunders, 512-218-8571. If you need only one insurance agent to keep tabs on all of your stuff, everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV, make it Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders. Mark, thanks for sponsoring the Recruiting Breakdown. All right, let's go to the defense. CJ, I think this is important because let's start with edge. It looks like a good crop in state, but I don't see anybody out of state necessarily that the Longhorns are just, gripping to have. They've already got Lance Jackson, from Pleasant Grove. Maybe that's part of it. They don't feel like they have to push since they already have one commitment. But the others that I've got, Chad Woodfork, Max Granville, who I know they like more than maybe they thought initially, Kamora Morgan, Gus Cordova, Deshaun Morgan, a lot of guys, almost all of them are in state at this point, basically.
Yeah, and for most of them, you don't have to go too far. Cordova and Morgan are both Austin residents. They're right around the corner. They were both on campus as well for the junior day not too long ago. It's impressive to me, this state of in-state edges, or this crop of in-state edges. There's a lot of length here. And I think looking back at previous cycles, you didn't get a lot of that. There was a couple guys out of Garland or Mesquite that might have popped up every now and then in previous cycles, but you didn't see it from a true, holistic view at the state of in-state, edges. And I think that's what you get right now. Chad Woodfork is someone that was on campus last spring. He is very fond of what Kelvin Banks is doing right now. He's out of Summer Creek. Obviously, he grew up watching Kelvin Banks. Kamora Morgan right now has Texas in his top 5 as well. So a lot to like right now. And, we talked about Smith Orogbo, a recent Texas offer out of the Houston area. His film is very exciting, and he's one that's really on a high, steep trajectory in the spring in terms of where his recruitment is going to go. Texas gets involved, and it looks like they won't be the last school because his recruitment in film from his junior season is really exciting.
I'll tell you what, let's move on to defensive tackle. This one's interesting because they are going to do some stuff out of state. They already have. Brandon Brown, we saw pictures of Tashard Choice, Jeff Banks, and Steve Sarkisian all at O'Galley High School in Florida meeting with Brandon Brown. They love that guy. They're going to have to fend off some national competition. He's already committed to Texas, but, that's how recruiting goes. Also out of state, I want to put this guy on your radar, Ethan Utley. Out of Nashville, Tennessee, has been to Texas before already, and seems to like the Longhorns. Has some national offers as well as in-state offers from Tennessee. LSU is offered 6'3.5", 275 though. Texas involved there, but the in-state crop again looks pretty good, relatively speaking. That's Zion Williams, Floyd Guidry, Shane Rink's son, Landon, and then also Xavier Akpono. DJ Sanders, Dylan Battle, a bunch of guys. Do you think Texas is going to go for another out-of-state guy, or do you think they're going to try to keep Brown and see what happens here at defensive tackle?
I think if you're able to keep Brandon Brown, it's going to be a successful year on the defensive line. You want to add and complement him and what he brings to the defensive line. But for Coach Baker in his first year as a Texas recruiting coach, it kind of depends on how quickly he's able to get acclimated. I think staying in state's probably more likely as a result of these kids being more fond of the Texas staff in general, and obviously the program in which is now adding Coach Baker to the mold. That is until he's able to get his feet really under him and running on the recruiting grounds. I look at Zion Williams and Floyd Guidry as two guys to really watch in this class. Guidry came out on record and said that Texas is one of his dream schools. That was before visiting for the Texas Junior Day. And obviously Zion Williams might be the best interior defensive lineman in the state of Texas. So, again, a pretty strong crop of interior defensive linemen this year in Texas. Those are the two guys that I would keep a close eye on moving forward into the spring.
All right. Linebacker, a little bit different here. It is loaded.
Yeah.
In state. And they've already got Anthony Williams out of Shadow Creek. That's a guy that's a quasi-edge outside linebacker. But, man, Bo Barnes, Riley Pettijohn, there aren't going to be betters. But, they've offered a couple guys from California, too, and one from Georgia. You think they're just putting their making sure they have irons in the fire in case they can't get Barnes and Pettijohn out of this group? Because, look, I mean, Nasir Wyatt's terrific out of Mater Dei. They've got a couple other ones, a guy out of California, too, Teo, I believe his last name is. What's Texas thinking here? Because I have to think if they get Pettijohn and Barnes, they got to be smiling from ear to ear.
I would agree 100%, especially after taking just one linebacker in 2024. It looks like right now they're lined up to have a pretty special linebacking class, and that is, of course, with Bo Barnes and Riley Pettijohn up at the top. It's going to be a regional battle for Elijah Bo Barnes. Obviously, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, LSU are all in the mix. Riley Pettijohn, Michigan's now getting involved pretty heavily for him as well, but you'll start seeing the similar kind of contenders with A&M, Oklahoma, some Alabamas perhaps.
Georgia's going to get in there with Pettijohn too, I think, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I think Texas would like to keep those two guys in state. Those are the two top guys, in my opinion, for the linebacking position in the state. If they aren't unable, there are a couple names that they were able to get onto campus this past week. Javar Thomas out of the Houston area and Jaden Shelton out of South Oak Cliff. Both of them are talented prospects in their own right. They've started to become more regional prospects as well on the larger scale recruiting stage. So I'm very comfortable with saying that this linebacking crop for the in-state guys is pretty talented.
All right, I'm going to mix these next two positions together, and that's cornerback and safety. Look, Dorian Brew out of Conroe is a priority for Texas, but Ohio State has a strong tie there. Then you have guys like Devin Sanchez, who's already committed to Ohio State, Jabari Anton, who's already committed to LSU, Kobe Sellers, who apparently likes OU a lot out of Shadow Creek, and Caleb Chester out of Fort Bend Marshall, Texas and Texas A&M right now, it looks like, as well as LSU maybe going head-to-head for that. Out of state, though, there's not much at corner. Chuck McDonald out of Mater Dei, maybe. Another mine. This is one of 5 prospects Texas is interested in at Mater Dei. At safety, Jonah Williams out of Ball High is a blue chip. I mean, he's as blue as they come. Saul Reyes out of DeSoto is another one. But one guy to keep an eye on that you mentioned to me is Fajim Delaney. Tell people a little bit about the safety out of Maryland.
Yeah, very talented national prospect. He's in that top 50, top 45 range right now on the national rankings. He's on record, having talked to previous reporters, that he is very, very much looking forward to getting down to Austin to see what Texas has to offer. A little bit of a change in what we've seen from a national perspective from these national recruits when talking about Texas. Obviously, I believe that is the result of making a run to the college football playoff. And Delaney's one of those guys who, out of only Maryland, has mentioned that Texas is a school that has caught his interest, and I think that's very important moving forward because you're looking at the rest of this in-state defensive back group. And, we've talked about the edges and the defensive line and the linebackers. Defensive back, perhaps not as deep as what you would have thought for an in-state Texas crop. So if Texas is able to get some of these extra outside or out-of-state eyes, that's only going to help what will be a pretty strong 25 crop.
Yeah, they need to hit on a few of these out-of-state guys. They already have Brandon Brown, Amari Winston, KJ Lacey, But adding and sprinkling in 4 or 5 more, I think gives your class a little bit more of that high-end discussion. When you start talking about guys that are in, I don't know, the top 50 in the country, like Delaney, that's a big piece of it, right? And so very interesting there. All right, last thing I want to talk about here is this, and that is Texas overall and their recruiting positioning. We've seen Steve Sarkisian in the early part of this week out all across the Deep South, right? And the last week they were in California a little bit. They're clearly going to be recruiting in the Deep South. I personally am big fan of this. You have to spread your wings and get higher ranked players, more of them on your board, so you're not dropping down to that next level. Do you see Texas being successful with this kind of tactic, CJ, or do you think this is a lot to do for not much? I mean, right now they've already got 3 commitments from the Deep South.
Yeah, a couple things. I think if there's ever a time to really make some imprints in the Deep South, it's a year in which you're coming off of, a college football playoff appearance, and it's the year in which you're entering the SEC, and where all of your games will now be in the Deep South territory. So that's, I think, the best of both worlds. They complement each other very well. But I look at the hiring of Kenny Baker, the new defensive line coach. Texas went out and got a guy who has ties to the Deep South while also having a year of NFL experience. I thought that, in a way, it fit or checked off a box in which Sarkisian wanted to hit for his defensive line hire. And I know that you could talk about his experience not being as deep of a resume, but hey, he's got ties to the Deep South. So does Tashard Choice. That's kind of where you're looking at the strengths of this Texas staff right now, is they cover the country so well. Coach Nansen has the Polynesian ties. Coach Jackson and Sarkisian and Banks all have ties out to California. Obviously, Coach Flood has ties to the Northeast as well. So it's very interesting to me to see how the makeup of this coaching staff fits really an entire country in a way. We've seen Sarkisian and his staff go out to Arizona and California on the West Coast. We've talked about the stops in Louisiana with Coach Brandon Harris going out while being elevated to the coaching staff as well. Florida's been a spot they've had success with, as well as, going into Mississippi. Melvin Hills is a guy that they just added from the defensive line crop a year ago. So I think of it as Texas is checking every stone across the country right now to find the 20 or 23 guys that they can fit into a class and say, hey, we checked every box, every nook and cranny to find what we believe will be the next era of successful Texas Longhorns. And right now they're doing a great job of it nationally.
All right, good stuff, CJ. I just think it's I think that, Texas has to keep putting its feelers out there. And I do think that the SEC is going to change the trajectory of Texas recruiting in the Deep South. It's not been something Texas historically has done in my lifetime, really. They've cherry-picked a couple, but going more into that region, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how Texas fares in that kind of combat, for lack of a better term, right? All right. That's going to do it for today's recruiting breakdown, brought to you by Mark Saunders of Allstate Insurance. For CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. Make sure you check in for the live stream tonight with Rod, CJ, and Aaron. Hook 'em.